What if the employee in the case, having attempted suicide, wants to come back to work? How do we reintegrate that person into society? And there are three things that you need to think about. First is privacy, the second is interaction, and then the third is whether or not there's a right to confirm the employee's fit for the job. Let's talk about privacy. If an employee makes any kind of a request for an accommodation, and you enter into the interactive process to find a reasonable accommodation, or you became aware that an employee has attempted suicide, HIPAA applies. The few people who know, the better. If a manager is in a need-to-know position, they must understand they cannot share that information with others. So if we're going to reintegrate a person and it becomes common knowledge the employee attempted suicide, it's going to be much, much more difficult to successfully reintegrate that employee. Interaction with managers. We want to make sure that the managers understand the employee has got a condition, whatever that is in that situation, that we're going to find an accommodation if it's appropriate so that person can work successfully and perform the trigger, the essential functions of the job. Now, what about getting a fit for duty certification from the healthcare professional? Yes, you have a right to it. And it's important that we know the employee coming back to work will not be a threat to himself or to others in the workplace. You have a right to know that. So you can ask the employee to do that. It's well within your boundaries to ask for that. So there are some legal concerns. And the first is the scope of a challenge. And the reality is, it's not for people in HR or managers to know all the different ins and outs of the different statutes, but the challenge is to understand what you can handle on your own and when you do need to bring people in. And I think that's an important thing to consider. Insurance is something else that I wanted to talk about. Know what your policies cover, know what they don't cover. Some companies, some organizations have employees that cover workplace harassment and discrimination. Some have a policy that only covers the legal fees incurred in workplace harassment or discrimination cases, but not potential damages. Some don't have any insurance at all. Spend some time, talk with your healthcare provider, your insurance provider, and find out what your coverage is and whether it makes sense to have a better policy. Coaching and training, and we're going to get on that in a moment when we talk about action steps, but coaching and training is really important. It's something that some people put off because it costs money, or they do it on the cheap and it sends a bad message. Third-party intervention, things like having an EAP, things like having someone who's a specialist in a certain area come in and talk to employees every now and then is a really great way to shift the perception and build much better trust in organizations. So let's get to those action steps. And the first one is training. There are different ways you can train. You can train through an online portal. You can train remotely on platforms such as Zoom, or you can do in-person training. It's important that the training is tailored to the audience, and the messaging from scheduling the training to doing the training is a message that works for that particular organization, not some other company. So whatever you do, please do not make it a canned program. There should be two trainings, one for the employees, and things like harassment, things like bullying, as well as things like recognizing employees who have challenges such as perhaps depression, or their affect has changed dramatically over a period of time, or they're inconsistent in their affect. Employees need to recognize that. Managers need a separate training. And in addition to everything the employees are trained on, the managers should be trained on what to do when an issue comes to their attention? How should they respond to it? This is all part of educating your team, making your team aware of all the different challenges people have. Communication is critical because that's part of what builds that trust between managers and employees. And with employees working remotely, please make sure that they're not feeling isolated and removed from the team. It's important for those employees to feel like they are part of the team. Now, we talked about employee assistance programs, and they're really very important. And that insurance, please bring that back to your organizations and talk about what you have and maybe what you need, because that's one of those things where you get that policy in place and then something happens, you're covered. But if you're saying, you know what, we're going to put that in the pile and we'll get to that in 30 or 60 days, and then a claim is made, you're not covered anymore. And last but not least on this is that shift of perception. We want employees to believe this is a great place where I work. And if I have an issue, if I have a problem, my manager, my supervisor, my HR team, my leadership, they want to hear from me because they want this to be a great place to work. That's the perception that will eliminate a lot of the problems we have. So, when I do programs like this, and I hope that people, do take some of these ideas back to their team, that perception will make a huge difference, because that perception is what's going to get people to speak up. So I want to jump forward one more slide. And I have some resources that I thought you might want to look at. So we'll take a moment to give you a chance to look at the resources that are listed here. And then Sally, I'm going to turn it back to you when they're finished.
Thank you so much, David. I'm just listening to all that information, and it seems like a crime to have you connect all of those dots in such a short period of time, but you did such a masterful job. I'm sure many people will want to learn more. Final slide for all of the folks out there, please join us over at workplacesuicideprevention.com. Take the pledge, register as an official pledge partner, and come along, take action steps to make your workplace or professional association more suicide informed.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining today.